We are live. Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday night Bible study. Tonight we're in Ezra chapters 1 through 7. So far there's nobody in the room except me. But in the event that somebody's watching online, maybe John and Debbie. Hi, John and Debbie. Maybe Barbara. Hi, Barbara. Maybe Hope. Hi, Hope. Maybe Sanford and Kathy. Hi, Sanford and Kathy. If you're out there, I say hello. Of course, you're not going to say hello back, but maybe you can put a note in the comments. I'm going to wait a few minutes and see if anybody does arrive. I've written down some prayer requests that I want to remember tonight. Remember to pray for Levi Harris. Still in the hospital recovering from the surgery he had late last week to try, and what the surgeons have said is they're going to try and extend Levi's life. They don't know for how long, how much longer he will have, and whether their surgery will be helpful. But so far they haven't given any hope of a path toward recovery short of the miraculous. So that's what we're asking God for healing for Levi, for strength for his wife Hannah, and their five children, including a little girl, 3 months, little boy, I guess, 3 to 4 months old. And my niece Katie, who's undergoing some medical tests. And tomorrow is her birthday, so praying God's blessing on her and for her health. And for Joan Bruner, who we believe was scheduled to be released from rehab today and to return home. So we want to remember to pray for them. I'm going to wait another few minutes to see if anybody arrives. We read the first 7 chapters of Ezra this week. And in the coming week, we will finish Ezra. There are just 3 chapters left in the Book of Ezra, and then we'll start Nehemiah. And we'll spend a couple of weeks in Nehemiah before we get to Esther. We're moving quickly through Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, but then it'll slow down again when we get to Job. We'll spend a month and a half in Job, and then the Psalms will take us throughout most of the rest of this year, 150 chapters. That's 5 months from when we hit Psalms. So possibly we'll get through Psalms and Proverbs and into Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes before the end of the year. All right. I did upload the PDF document with notes from tonight on our Facebook Bible reading page. If you're watching, if you're joining us online and you're not a part of that Facebook discussion group, reach out to me and let me know. If you are on Facebook and you'd like to be added to that group, let me know and I will make sure that you get added. Valentine's Day. Hope that you can enjoy some moments of celebrating with those you love. Another couple of minutes and then I will shut down the live stream. Lord, I want to pray for Levi, and for his wife Hannah and their children. Lord, I ask that you would do for them what no doctor can. Do for them what no nurse, no specialist, no human being can do. You are the God who heals. You are the God who creates. You formed Levi in his mother's womb. He, like all of us, is fearfully and wonderfully made. You know the intrusion of the cancer that is in the body that you formed. You command the wind and the waves, the spirits. You hold the power of life and death. You give sight to the blind. You open the ears of the deaf. You open the mouths of the dumb. You make the lame to walk and the blind to see. You calm the storms of our lives. And so I pray, Father, that you would, with the power of your word and will, cleanse Levi of that cancer that has taken over so much of his body, so many of his organs, lungs, liver, kidney, and more. And we don't know how, we don't know when. We know that he is your child. We know that he and his wife bow before you, are trusting in you, seeking your mercy for them. For Lord, I know that you can heal Levi if you choose to heal him by bringing him through the valley of the shadow of death and bringing him home into your presence. That would be a perfect healing. And if that is your will, then give us the grace and peace to accept it. But Lord, if you have something else in mind to show your glory, we pray your glory be revealed through Levi.
We're not leaving you all alone.
Hi.
We kind of screwed up with our time.
Oh, that's all right. I was waiting, and because I was online and not knowing if anybody's out there, I was just praying.
Okay.
I might have been praying by myself, but I was praying out loud just in case, but it doesn't matter if anybody else heard because God's here.
Amen.
That smells really good.
I took a pill because I knew that it was spaghetti. So if I don't eat, I'll be passing out here shortly.
Literally.
A pill that allows you to digest? Or?
No,
So that
it excites my
pancreas.
pancreas to produce insulin,
Okay,
but if I don't have carbs to
okay,
counter it,
okay.
I go real
So
low.
you
and I
take
pass out.
the pill before you eat, knowing
Yeah.
that you're going to eat, but then if you don't eat,
I'm in big trouble.
you see it.
I've crashed 4 times, but I catch it every time.
Hmm.
So I have to be careful, because
Yes,
So if it's a lower heart rate, it doesn't
Yeah, so if it's a low carb meal, I don't do it.
Okay. Okay.
So keep praying for Adam, because I did give him the 360 trip
Yeah.
through the Bible and
Okay.
salvation. And he asked my permission to propose to Lindsay.
Don't repeat that. You heard it.
Yeah.
So I gave him a conditional blessing.
Okay.
I said, you have to get saved,
Okay.
which is what I did.
It has to be genuine.
Right. Well, and I told him that, I said, I could put a gun to your head, and that won't mean anything. And I said, I'm gonna show you right now, I'm gonna show you the Romans road and all that, but I'm not gonna put you on the spot, because I'm not, this isn't high pressure sales. Like, if it's not real, it's no good. I just want you to think about it. And then, so when he got out of the Navy, he got out under, other than honorable,
Okay.
and, I told him that not a condition of marriage, but a condition for me, do the paperwork to get that turned into an honorable discharge, because me being a 30-year retired man, I just have a problem dealing with you.
Well, to get that status changed opens other doors for him too.
Yeah, it does. I think he already has the paperwork in.
Mhm. So, Lindsay's eating nights bad, she wants to quit. I didn't even know when she took the job that she had the option not to take nights,
Well, I mean, if there was an opening.
but, I don't know.
There's usually a shift differential, she makes a little bit
Yes.
more money working overnights,
I know, yeah.
but, it's, I don't know, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah.
Blood money.
Matthew has been on nights ever since he started.
That's
but
incredible, a long
he's-
time.
He's now, he's on paternity leave right now, he's on family leave, but when he goes back, he starts on a new shift, which runs from 1 in the afternoon to 1 at night. So
Okay.
it's better,
Yeah.
it's better than 7 at night to 7 in the
He'll
morning.
become a normal, somewhat.
Yeah, he'll be home at night and sleep at
Mhm.
night, maybe get up a little later in the morning, but he'll have part of a normal day with his
Yeah,
family.
that'll be better. Yeah.
How's the baby and mommy doing?
They're doing great. They're doing great. She's 2 months old, 2 months and 4 days old, and Liz went back to work.
Oh, wow.
She works from home, part-time,
Uh-huh.
so she went back, Monday, she started back 3 hours a day, 3 days a week.
Mhm.
And our son Ryan started work Monday, he's been out of work since July. He started work, he's working at the same agency Kelly works
Oh,
at.
good. Oh, wow,
So,
good.
He commuted in with her Monday and today.
That's
They worked from home yesterday, their office was closed.
Mhm.
Kelly works from home on Tuesdays anyway. He worked from home after 1 day in the office, but they issued him a laptop and he had some training, so he was able to put in a day at home. Today he's back in the city. His first day wasn't great, but Kelly said today he's better. He had a long talk with the person who hired him.
Mhm.
He first thought, his job was basically gonna be call center, which is not what he wants. He said that's a big step back from him.
Mhm.
But evidently, he had a long talk with the manager, the supervisor today, and they were gonna go out for lunch, so
Mhm.
that's
Nice.
good.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. And
You-
he's the one that was in the military.
Yeah, well, actually, both Ryan and Matt.
Yes,
Yeah.
or the one that came back from us.
Yes, Ryan is the one who was in Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna keep praying.
Mhm.
Yep.
And you guys, go ahead, keep eating,
And-
please. I was praying for Levi Harris.
Okay, yes.
And Lord, I am asking you for Adam. I am asking you, Lord, to open his heart. I pray, Lord, that he will come to you in faith, not because he wants to marry Lindsay, but because he knows he needs you. And Lord, I pray that you would look into his heart, call out to him. I believe that you have been calling out to him. You used Paul to present the gospel to him very clearly. And now, Lord, he knows enough, and we pray that you would grant to him the faith to believe, to receive the forgiveness of sins and the gift of everlasting life. Lord, I want to lift up Joan Gruner, who is supposed to return home today, and she and her husband, Tom. And Lord, she's going to need a lot of support. She's not going to be able to do very much alone, and I pray that you would keep her safe. Pray that it is safe for her to be at home, and that help is available, help is supplied, and that people will be bringing meals in. I pray that she has what she needs. Lord, I pray for my niece Katie, and Lord, for the doctors to learn what they need to learn from the diagnostics that they're running. I pray that you would strengthen her, restore her to full health. Help her, Father, to celebrate her birthday tomorrow and to be joyful in it. And Lord, help her as she's turning 21. Help her to make wise decisions. Help her as she is adulting now. And keep her safe, protect her, Lord, and give her wisdom and courage to do what she needs to do. And I ask this for your sake, for your glory, in Jesus' name. Amen. Before you came in, I was praying for Levi Harris, who is still recovering from the surgery, had a kidney removed. And what we know is not a lot, but what we know is the doctors took some cancer out, but they knew they would not be able to remove all of the cancer. It's in several of his organs. And they are not saying that they have any means to offer hope for recovery, but rather to give him more time. That's what they're saying. It's a hard thing to hear. This is a young couple. They're our kids' age. We know Hannah because Hannah came to teen camp when our kids were in teen camp there. So they're in their middle 30s. They have 5 children, I think, 5 young children. I participated in Hannah and Levi's wedding. So we've known them for a long time, 20 years, I guess.
Where they live?
They live somewhere in the Montrose area between Scranton and Boone. I don't know exactly, but in that region. He's in the hospital in Philadelphia. All right, Ezra. So we've made it through. I'm sorry I wasn't here last Wednesday night. You guys knew in advance, so you didn't come.
We did, yeah.
I have one other Wednesday coming up when I'm not going to be able to be here. Now, next week is winter break,
Yes.
and so there's no school, so there will be no Wednesday night program next week.
And what away?
You're away, so that works out. Are you guys going to be here this Sunday? No.
Is that membership?
No, but my message this Sunday is the sinner's prayer.
Oh, man.
We'll fit in.
Okay. The sinner's prayer, I'm calling it the sinner's saving prayer. It's not, and I'm going to make this, it's not magic words. You don't have to say the magic words that have the power to save you, but.
We don't have to tune in live, right?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
That'll make best.
Oh, best rough, yeah.
And even though our son and daughter-in-law haven't been here,
Yeah,
They know what.
they've been watching too. Great. So, I'm going to spend most of this year teaching on prayer. And I'm going to start with what I'm calling simple prayer. And the most simple of all is, Lord, save me. That's the most important period, most important period. So that's my message, and when you were talking about Adam,
Yeah, that would have been perfect.
but hopefully he'll hear after the fact.
Well, I literally gave him Genesis to Revelation,
Okay, yeah,
and I was careful to give the foreshadowing analogies of Eve having to die, or Adam having to die for Eve
mhm.
to be created,
Oh, yeah,
and which is like Jesus dying for the
oh,
bride of the church.
yeah,
So, because I asked him, one of the important questions about me asking him is, are you willing to die for my daughter? No, I gave him a lot. He was very attentive. He didn't ask many questions.
yeah,
Very attentive.
okay. Well, we're praying. It's good seed, it's good seed.
And he's seeing things happen
Yeah,
that there's no other explanation.
yeah, okay.
Well, the fact that he even was here on that level was just purely,
He did tell me that his grandmother for 10 years took him to church
Mm,
when he was exposed to Christianity.
okay.
When they asked him point blank if he knew he was going to heaven, should he die, he
You
wouldn't.
couldn't say yes.
He couldn't say yes. And then, I gave him the Roman road and all that.
Mhm.
I specifically told him I wouldn't pressure him because pressure is no good. I just need you to think about the words you're
Yeah.
he's very intelligent, and he's very logical, so.
Okay. Well, that means he should really understand the argument in Romans.
Mhm.
That's a very logical presentation.
And if you have a good book, he reads all the time, so if you know a good book for him to read,
And I told him another precondition of actual marriage is Christian pre-marriage counsel.
Okay,
So do you do that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to break up in
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's quite all right. How are things going with you, Pastor Anthony?
Everything ready?
Good. We have, we are upgrading our website, the church's website. And part of it is, we're gonna have new email addresses that instead of me using my private Gmail address, I have dennis@harmonyministriesny.org. And we've set up an email address for you also, raphael@harmonyministries.org, harmonyministriesny.org. And we would like to get your biography to put with your picture on the website. And we probably want to do that in English and in Spanish. So we probably want to have a Spanish version of the website too, so it's useful for everybody. And I will send you the information to set up your account. I'll send you the beginning password, and then you go in and you set your own password.
All right.
Okay. Okay, Ezra. It's only 10 chapters long, so we're gonna finish Ezra in this coming week and start into Nehemiah. Ezra begins to tell the story of the return of the Jewish people from their 70 years of captivity in Babylon, what I call timeout. God sent them to timeout. Sit there and think about what you've done for 70 years. Ezra begins with a timestamp in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So that tells us when. We can reference that in historical records. Extra biblical historical records can confirm, so that we have a very good idea time-wise when this is.
500-ish.
530, 586. We start the exile period at 586 BC. That's when Nebuchadnezzar sacked and destroyed the temple. Though some captives had already been taken before then. So 586 plus 70 years brings us to 516 BC, 500 years before Christ. Now, the Babylonian Empire had been conquered by the Persians, the Medes and the Persians. So Cyrus, king of Persia, has now, because he conquered Babylon, he has now assumed possession of all of the things in Babylon, including these Jewish hostages, captive slaves. But we read that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. This reminds us that God can put it into the heart of anyone, whether they are a God-fearing person or not, can put it into the heart of anyone to accomplish God's purpose. Whether or not they're knowingly acting, whether they are aware that they're acting under the guidance of God or not. We don't know for sure, but from what Cyrus says, either he is a believer himself, or he at least acknowledges that the Jewish believers, Daniel among them, are really the God that they're worshiping is really a powerful God. Because in Cyrus's proclamation in Ezra 1:2, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He recognizes that his authority to rule on earth as king comes from the God of heaven. That's the Jewish. And he says, he has charged me, God has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. You remember how God put that in David's heart and then took it out of David's heart and put it into Solomon's heart? And it happened under Solomon. And God now has taken that same burden and he's put it into the heart of a pagan, well, maybe formerly pagan king who, at least in some sense, is a believer. He's a God-fearing man. And he said, God has told me to build him a house in Jerusalem. And so he orders that every survivor among Judah, every survivor, wherever he is, should be assisted by the men of his place with silver and gold, with goods and with beasts, besides freewill offerings for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. So God has put his people into timeout. He has set them aside for 70 years. He told them by the prophets, build houses, plant crops, prosper in Babylon. You are there because it is in my good purpose for you to be there. And this is that beautiful verse in Jeremiah 29:11. Is that right? Jeremiah 29:11-12. For I know the plans I have for you. I'm sending you into exile. That's my plan for you. But that's not the whole plan. I'm putting you there because even though it doesn't seem like it to you, my plan for you is to prosper you, not to harm you. Though it feels right now like I'm harming you. I'm spanking you right now, but my discipline is for your good, not for your evil.
Amen.
I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans that will give you a hope in the future. So during the 70 years you're there, you're going to live, and many of you will die. Others will be born who never knew this place, Jerusalem, that I'm sending you out of. But when the time of my appointment for you to be there has ended, I will bring you back and I will resume my good plan for you here in this place. So Cyrus, whether he knew he was doing it or not, was fulfilling that prophecy spoken by Jeremiah. And not only was he letting them go, he was sending them on their way with the means to rebuild. Now think about this, because it reminds me of when Israel finally went up out of Egypt after the 10 plagues, and Pharaoh finally reluctantly said, okay, go. No strings attached, just go. What did they take with them? They took the treasures of Egypt with them. The people of Egypt were so glad to see them leave that they gave them everything they would need to live, treasure, whatever they needed. They sent them on their way, not runaway slaves, broke and penniless, but with the wealth of Egypt. And here they are again in a similar situation, returning from the place where they have been in bondage. And they are leaving there, not just with the clothes on their back, but with the financial means to return home and rebuild. And I think that that's astonishing. And it makes me wonder why we ever worry about, if we're doing what God wants us to do, why should we ever worry about can we afford it?
Which falls in line with Pastor John's, talking about George Miller, who,
Yeah, I haven't heard his message yet, I'm going to, but we're talking about this initiative in Middletown, and we know that that's gonna have a price tag. I'm not worried about what it's gonna cost in terms of money. The resources we are looking to see, the resources we need to see are the people who will commit to being part of that, to volunteer with time to spend, because the success of this initiative in Middletown, whatever space we end up in and whatever plans and programs we end up executing, the success of that is going to depend on whether or not we have the volunteers to accomplish it. I'm not worried at all about the financial cost. That's the last thing we have to worry about. Anyway, because I see examples like this. God's people are being sent after 70 years as slaves. They're being sent away. Many of them have never lived anywhere else but in Babylon, and they're being sent away with whatever they can carry. And people are sending money with them so that they won't have any.
yes, I like the word free will offering,
Yeah,
because then they don't have a gun to their head.
no. And as we're going to see, that happened not once but multiple times. All right. Not only did Cyrus issue this decree that they return, but we also read in verse 7, Cyrus the king also brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem 70 years earlier, and had put in the house of his gods. And we remember in Daniel that Belshazzar, the king who followed Nebuchadnezzar, was boasting about his glorious victory over the Jews and using those sacred items from the Jewish temple in his drunken party, and that very night it cost him his life. Those things still existed, and Cyrus said, I don't have any need for these things. These belong in Judah, in the house of the God of Israel, and they're going to go back where they belong. Just amazing. So, at the end of chapter 1, Cyrus put these things in charge of Mithredath the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And the question came up this week in our Facebook group, who is Sheshbazzar? And I have a theory. It's not unique to me. Many commentators suggest this. But there are two prevailing theories. The first is that Sheshbazzar is the Babylonian name given to Zerubbabel, who was in the line of David. He was the king, the heir to the throne of Judah, and that he was renamed Sheshbazzar. And we know that they did that because Daniel tells us that Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael were given Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel was given the name of Belteshazzar. So there's some similarities there in how their language is used. And so one theory, and it's the theory that I think most likely, is that Sheshbazzar was actually Zerubbabel. The other theory is that Sheshbazzar was a Babylonian or Persian official that Cyrus appointed to be governor over this part of his empire, but to administer it favorably for the people of Judah. Maybe I'm gonna learn, but so far I don't have a certain knowledge. I just lean toward it's Zerubbabel. Both names recur in the book of Ezra, and it may be that when the story is being told through the words of the king, the Persian king, the name he uses is Sheshbazzar. But when Ezra is telling the story through the eyes of the Jewish people, he refers to him as Zerubbabel. But I'm not certain, and maybe we'll learn better as we go. Okay, so we come to chapter 2. So the return begins, chapter 2, and chapter 2 gives us name after name after name, and number after number after number of the people who returned from captivity in Babylon. And we learn that it's just the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, because the other 10 tribes had gone to the northern kingdom when the kingdom divided, and those 10 tribes essentially ceased to exist as distinct tribes. And so the kingdom of Judah is made up of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. However, there are priests and Levites, those who did not leave, because the priests and Levites were scattered throughout the kingdom. Some were part of the northern kingdom of Israel, and some were part of the southern kingdom of Judah. Most of the priests would have gravitated toward Judah because that's where the temple was.
Does it bunch of them leave too? Like, and that,
Yeah.
a lot of them left.
A lot of them left, a lot of them rebelled, and were judged. But there is a remainder, there is a remnant. We talk about the remnant a lot. This is because when we get to the end of chapter 2 and we see the total number given of all the people that returned from exile is just around 50,000 people. 50,000 people returned. Now, if you remember, even to a few weeks ago when we were talking about the numbers of the fighting men, at one point it was over 1 million fighting men in the kingdom of Judah, not to mention Israel. And so you see, there is just a small, 50,000 sounds like a lot of people, but in comparison to well over 1 million, and that just numbers the fighting men, able-bodied men of fighting age.
So you could probably times
So,
that by 3.
At least 3 million. What's left that returned is 50,000. Now, there are probably some people who decided not to return. People who were too old or too weak, or who had no desire to leave what they had established here. They were satisfied. The Book of Esther describes that there are people who did not return. Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther are kind of happening during the same period of history. Ezra covers a longer period of time than Nehemiah does, but the story of Esther fits into that. We're going to see the names of 3 different kings of Persia in the 10 chapters of Ezra. And the middle one, I think the middle one is the one who took Esther as wife. Okay. Again, there's a mention at the end of chapter 2 of free will offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. And when they came, the very end of chapter 2, 70 verses in chapter 2 is a long chapter. Very end of that chapter, we read, the priests, the Levites, and some of the people, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants lived in their towns, and all the rest of the Israel in their towns. If you remember, before the divided kingdom, before all of that, families, clans, tribes settled in specific parts of the land, and often each family would settle in one town. So there's cities, towns, and villages. Probably the major difference between cities, towns, and villages is the larger would have walls and fortifications. So they went back to Judah, and they began to resettle the whole land of Judah, not just Jerusalem. And so chapter 3 opens, when the 7th month came. It's not clear to me if Ezra means the 7th month of the calendar or the 7th month of the return. In the next time reference, it's going to be more specific. But 7 months had passed, and the children of Israel were in the towns, and after 7 months they all came to Jerusalem. They all came together. They gathered as one man to Jerusalem. And then arose Jeshua, that's a common name, common Jewish name, Joshua, Jeshua, Yeshua, it's the name in the New Testament, Jesus. So it's a very common name. Yeshua, the son of Yozadak, with his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, with his kinsmen. So there's the priests and there's the royal family, the king, Zerubbabel, and his household. And they built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it. Even before they began to rebuild the temple, they first erected an altar. And they offered burnt offerings as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So right away they're returning to their roots, saying this is what God said for us to do, and we're going to try to do it the way God said. You will remember all of those hundreds of years under the various kings of Israel and Judah that there was a problem with idolatry. That was a recurring problem. Well, the exile appears to have solved that problem once and for all for the Jewish people. God appears to have, I'm not going to say this, it's not going to sound nice. He seems to have beaten it out of it. So they're going to reestablish the proper worship of their God. And they begin by setting up an altar and offering sacrifices, burnt offerings, morning and evening. And then we read, they kept the Feast of Booths, or Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings. I think that is, in the study of all of the Feasts of Israel, this is the one that is the most interesting to me. It's a national camp out. It's a national camping trip. Even if you have a house in Jerusalem, you go outside of your house and you build a lean-to, a tent, a booth, a shack, a temporary house for camping. And the purpose of that was to remind them of how they lived after God brought them out of bondage in Egypt. They were nomads. They were living in tents. And God said, I want you to do this every year to remember those times when I was providing for you miraculously. And so they began by keeping the Feast of Booths. So from the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. And so they gave money to the masons and the carpenters, and food, drink, and oil to the Sidonians, and the Tyrians to bring cedar trees from Lebanon to the sea, to Joppa, according to the grant that they had from Cyrus, king of Persia. This is so awesome. That is where they got the material for the original temple, the cedars of Lebanon. The King Hiram had set aside, David had worked out that agreement with him, and Solomon got the lumber, the timbers for the temple from Hiram. And so they said, we're going to try to use the same materials and make it as close to the original as we could. So, in the second year, verse 8, in the second year after their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem. So they've been in the land already a whole year. And in the second month of the second year, Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Yeshua the son of Jozadak made a beginning, together with the rest of their kinsmen, the priests and the Levites and all who had come to Jerusalem from captivity. And they laid the foundation. They laid the cornerstone of the foundation to rebuild the temple. And as they were working on laying the foundation, verse 10, the workers were working on the foundation, and the priests in their vestments came forward with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord according to the directions of David, king of Israel. They had a fantastic, groundbreaking cornerstone laying ceremony, and they sang responsibly, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel. And that is a familiar phrase that occurs in so many of the Psalms. That is maybe one of the favorite choruses of all of the Jewish songs. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. We've made a beginning. We are coming home, and we're going to build again the house of the Lord that was destroyed. But look at this curious note in verse 12 of chapter 3. Many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, the first temple. These are men well over 70 years old, because they have been enslaved, they've been in exile for 70 years. And to remember that building before it was destroyed means they had to be old enough when they left to have had clear understanding of what it was. And so those who had seen the first house wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation of this house being laid, though many shouted aloud for joy. So they're weeping. You might say, well, they're weeping tears of joy because the thing that had been destroyed is being put back. Except it's in contrast with people shouting for joy. So their weeping is clearly not weeping for joy. So what is it for? And we're never told exactly, but can you make some guess about why?
Me personally, I read what you wrote here, but I don't think it would almost be like they were just overtaken with grief because they had to leave.
They had
And all
lost
those years
it,
were lost.
So that might be the realization of what they had lost and what the price that had been paid.
And I think in our humanity, we always think if you're rebuilding something, you have to rebuild it at least the same or better, not ever smaller.
Yeah,
And I think that probably was a little bit of a brawl.
yeah.
And
What they were building was never going to be as splendid, as magnificent as what Solomon had built. It was never going to measure up. And that's my thought, that these old timers who had seen the original temple, and maybe they were weeping over the memory of having it destroyed. Maybe some of them remembered seeing it brought to rubble. But realizing that what they were going to put back in its place was never going to be as magnificent as the original.
Isn't that a symbol of what is going to happen?
Yeah, see, God in His grace and mercy forgives us. And when we have strayed and we've fallen subject to His discipline, He doesn't heal the scars. He doesn't undo the consequences of our misdeeds. So, we never get back what we gave up or what we lost because of our disobedience.
I think, I like to think about that just a little different,
Okay?
that there's always a cost.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're moved to do something good and godly, and you're allowing the Holy Spirit to work through you, there's always a cost. Because the first step we do is deny self, pick up our cross,
Mm-hmm.
and then follow Jesus. So there's always gonna be a cost.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, when, like you said, when we move away from God's plan, there's a cost. And so you may have some moments of what you think are rewards, but then reality always happens. Because God, I believe that God never lets His people enjoy sin.
Mm. Yeah.
Oh, He'll give you a
For a
season.
yeah.
He'll give you a season.
It'll be a
of it.
short season.
Yeah.
And depending on the sin,
Yeah.
it could be real short.
Yeah.
Because He's never gonna let you harm the body. You know,
I think there's a difference in when I give up willingly something that God doesn't want me to have, or when I hold on to it and make Him take it from me. In my whole high school life, well, maybe you haven't heard my testimony, this part of my testimony. All through my high school, I was focused on one goal. I wanted to go to a military academy. I wanted to go into the service. And I knew there were 4 military academies. 3 of them require a congressional appointment. And I believed, probably foolishly at the time, but my belief was reinforced by others. I believed that I didn't have the political connections to get a congressional appointment. And so I chose the 4th academy because that alone was focused only on merit and not on political appointment. And so I set my heart to earn an appointment to the Coast Guard Academy. And I passed every test. I had the academic qualifications. I had to go and take a physical fitness test, which I passed easily. I had to go to Keller Army Hospital in West Point and have a physical, a very thorough physical, which I passed without any problems. And by the beginning of my senior year, I was notified I was a finalist. I was one of 3,000 finalists in the nation. 3,000 of us that had applied and had met and passed every qualification.
and how many positions are available?
300.
Yeah.
It's also the smallest of the service academies. So, in the spring of my senior year, I got the letter that we were waiting for from the United States Coast Guard Academy, and I ran to the car. My mother was driving the car. And I had run into the post office to get the mail. I ran to the car with the letter, and I said, "Oh, this is the letter we've been waiting for." And she said, "Well, hurry up, open." And I opened it, and I started to read it, and it said, we regret to inform you that you have not been selected to be appointed to the Coast Guard Academy. And so my entire world came to an end. I had nothing.
No backup, right?
I had 2 months left of high school. This was in April. of 1979. I was graduating in June. Every other piece of mail I got from every other college had gone straight into the garbage. I hadn't visited, I hadn't looked at any other schools, I had no other plan. Everybody, I was so sure, and everybody else around me was so sure that I was going to get one of those appointments. And God took it away from me. And I was broken. And then for the first time in my life, I had an encounter. I had an encounter which in the moment was as real as any other conversation I've ever had. I had a voice that I heard in my head, not through my ears, but directly into my head. And that voice asked me, "Why are you crying?" Because I was crying, I was in tears. And I recognized right away whose voice it was, because it happened. It wasn't my mother. And I said, "You know why?" And God said to me, "Yes, I do. I do know why. Because you had a dream, you had a plan, and I've taken it away from you." And I said, "Yes." And then he said to me, "Dennis," he asked me this question. Just like if it was coming out of your mouth, I heard God ask me, Dennis, did you ever ask me what I thought about your plan?" And that was the last thing he said. But I knew that the answer to his question, and he knew that I knew the answer to his question, was no. I was so confident in my own ability to achieve this that I hadn't prayed about it. I hadn't asked God to bless my plans. I was just assuming that God would give me what I wanted. If I thought about it at all, God would give me what I wanted. And I realized then that I had promised God at some point earlier in my teenage years that I heard a message from Romans 12:1 and 2, present your bodies a living sacrifice. And I responded along with a number of other teenagers at that youth rally. I responded to that invitation. I think I even went forward and I said, "Yes, God, I'm offering you my body as a living sacrifice. You can do with me what you will." And then I promptly forgot about it. I meant that when I did it, but I didn't continue to think about what that was going to mean until that day when I remembered I had told God, "I am offering you my life as a sacrifice. You can do with me what you will." And then God reminded me, and he was in essence saying to me, "Dennis, did you mean it when you said it?" I did. And so he reminded me. The next day, I was on my way to the bus station, by the way, when I got the letter. My mother was driving me to the bus station in Binghamton, New York. I was going to get on a Greyhound bus, take that bus to Chicago, Illinois, and then transfer and take a bus south into South Central Illinois, where my older brother, was serving God as a youth pastor. And I was going to spend a week with them. That was my senior trip. I was not going to Washington with my senior class, good thing, because my senior class in Washington, D.C. on their class trip, that was a horrible experience. We had a student almost die of alcohol poisoning. And that was not a trip I wanted to be on, shouldn't have been on, so I didn't. My parents gave me, for my early graduation present, this is not an exaggeration, they gave me a one-way ticket to Gridley, Illinois. And we had already arranged that while I was out there during that week, there was a farmer in my brother's church that was going to hire me to work on his farm during the week while I was out there visiting. I'd have my evenings free, but I was gonna work on the farm during the day, and I would earn enough working for him to buy a one-way plane ticket home. So I was excited about that. But I was on my way to Binghamton. Mom was driving me to Binghamton to drop me off at the bus station when we got the letter. So I sat on that bus for 24 hours. I had a book bag with me with some snacks and a book to read, because at that time there wasn't cell phones. You didn't have anything. You didn't have any portable TV you could watch, whatever. So for 24 hours, I'm alone with my thoughts on that bus, and that was a miserable, miserable time for me. But during that trip, I'm remembering that I had promised God, and that I had forgotten, but He hadn't. And so the first night at my brother's house was Friday night. It was Good Friday. When we went to church, they had a Good Friday service, and after church, I was in the back foyer of the church, standing near my brother, because he was the youth pastor, and so he had responsibilities to talk to people. And so I was standing back there. I didn't know anybody except my brother and his wife. But one man came up to me and he politely shook my hand and he said, "So I understand you're graduating from high school in a couple of months. What are you going to do after high school?" And I answered him. It was as if I was not in charge of my voice, but I answered him, "Well, sir, I don't know, but I have not ruled out going into the ministry." I said those words. I had not thought those words until that moment. But as soon as I said those words, I knew that's what God wanted for me. That was God's plan for me. And suddenly, I had a future again. I didn't know what it was going to look like. But I knew that God had said no to this because He wanted to say yes to this. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is because I thought God had taken away my dream, and that was to serve Him. But God gave it back to me later on His terms, and far better, so that I did get to serve my country in uniform, not in the Coast Guard, but in the Army, because I thought about the Navy, and I knew that I would spend too much time away from my family if I went in the Navy. And the Army offered me the best path toward paying for graduate school. I'd already gotten my bachelor's degree, but I knew I needed a master's degree. I needed to go to seminary to do the things I knew that God wanted for me in ministry. So God gave me back. He gave that back to me. And that's why I'm saying, if you give something up for Him, you'll never miss it.
Right.
And He might just give you back what you gave up, but He'll give it, now it's His, not yours. So what my experience in the military, when the kids were little, we had two kids when I enlisted. Matthew was born at Fort Benning. But I got to go to Berlin, Germany. I got to be part of history, the wall coming down. I got to go through seminary on the GI Bill, and came through seminary with no school there. When God takes something from you, it's better that God lets you give it up. Because if you give it up willingly, it might just come back to you. But if it's something He has to tear away from you, it was never good for you in the first place. I guess that's the point I was trying to But I love remembering that story,
Mhm.
because it's one of those touchstones. You can go back and you can say, I know that God has been present and active in the key moments in my life. I know that God was standing at that intersection directing.
Well,
Provided.
you met your wife at Bible
That-
college,
that-
and I'm sure everything from that point forward
Every
just
good thing.
fell into place.
Every
No
good
fighting,
thing.
it just fell into place.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, back to Ezra. Chapter 4. The adversaries of Judah and Benjamin. There are people who have resettled in Judah after the Israelites left. And these people saw that the Jews were back and they were rebuilding, and they approached Zerubbabel, heads of the fathers' houses, and said, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here." That's how the Assyrian Empire. That's where Samaritans came from. The Assyrians would take people from their conquered countries and resettle them in other parts of the empire to keep their national fervor diluted, so that they wouldn't rise up in revolution. And so they took Jews out of Israel and they brought Gentiles and resettled them in Israel. And that's where these people are coming from. But Zerubbabel and Yeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' houses in Israel said to them, "No, you have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus has commanded." They said, "Well, we've got to try to keep this a pure Jewish thing. We've got to keep this between us and the God who promised our fathers."
Especially because, like you said, the idols have been removed.
Right.
And as soon as I read that, we sped with it before we came.
It's okay.
When I read it, it is whatever wisdom God had given them, because God, the word doesn't tell us specifically why they refused it.
Right.
But my inference was that they didn't want to introduce
Yeah.
into themselves what caused them to fall away so many other times.
That's right. This is what got us here.
So it was different than the free will offering
Yeah.
from the others,
Yeah.
because they weren't dictating
Right.
and trying to move in.
They weren't trying to blend in,
Right.
because that dilutes the purity.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that you can observe about Roman Catholicism as it expanded through the world into South America, for example. When the Spanish conquistadores came to South America and they brought Catholicism with them, what they did was that they took the religion of the natives and they took the natives' gods and made them saints. You can continue to pray to your gods. We'll just make them saints.
And they took their holidays and everything.
And holidays. So right. So
Constantinople did the same thing.
yes, I mean we celebrate Christmas on a pagan holiday. We try to sanctify whatever.
Yes.
Syncretism is the term for it.
Yes.
And the Jewish leaders in this moment recognized the danger of diluting their relationship with God. So the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah, made them afraid to build. They began to act as terrorists,
Yeah. The true colors.
to shut down. Now maybe what they were trying to do was get in on that government subsidy. Whatever. I'm not going to try to.
No matter what, it was not good.
It wasn't what God intended, and he led his people to say no, and that caused problems. So the problems persisted, it says, through all the days of Cyrus, even until the reign of Darius. But Darius didn't follow Cyrus. There's a king between Cyrus and Darius, or Darius. And we read about him in verse 7. In the days of Artaxerxes, verse 6, the reign of Ahasuerus, and then in verse 7, the days of Artaxerxes. We believe that those are two names for the same person. Ahasuerus, Artaxerxes. And I think this is the king that figures in the story of Esther. So, Ahasuerus, Artaxerxes, his reign comes between Cyrus and Darius. Now, in the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam and Mithridath and Tabeel, these adversaries of the work in Judah, they wrote a letter to King of Persia, and they made some accusation. Hey, by the way, did you know that there's some people here rebuilding this city of Jerusalem? And let's just remind you that this city of Jerusalem is notoriously rebellious. They've given problems to every king who has tried to reign over them. And if you let this continue, they're going to be a problem for you too. And Ahasuerus, Artaxerxes, when he read the letter, he trusted the people who wrote to him. Oh, they're looking out for my best interest. So he said, all right, let's put a cease and desist order on the construction. Let's freeze work and let's carry out an investigation. Well, the investigation dragged on and on and on and on and never went anywhere. And so the work remained stalled throughout the reign of King Artaxerxes. And it does not end until chapter 5. Chapter 5, we read, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo. These guys, we recognize them. We have their writings in the minor prophets toward the end of the Old Testament. They're contemporaries of Ezra and the return from the exile. And so these prophets spoke for God to the people in Judah and Jerusalem and said, you need to pick up and start this work again. You have been halted. You've waited long enough. God is saying to you, renew the work, start working again. And so they did. And the opposition, the Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, that's what they called it, and Shethar Bozenai, the river being the Jordan River. They said, who gave you permission to start this work again? And who's responsible for this? And so they took down everybody's names, and they filed a report to now King Darius. And what's so fascinating is Tattenai accurately recorded the statement made by the Jewish leaders and included it in his letter to King Darius. And we asked them, verse 9 of chapter 5, we asked them, who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish the structure? We asked them their names because we want to make sure that those people responsible are held responsible. And verse 11, this was what they answered us. We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. And here's why our fathers angered the God of heaven. He gave our fathers into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who destroyed this house and carried away the people. But in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, Cyrus made this decree, and they told the story of how they were ordered by King Cyrus to come back to Judah and build a temple. And so Darius receives this letter, and he, in chapter 6, sent out a decree, let's find out, did Cyrus make that proclamation? And sure enough, they found the original proclamation signed by Cyrus, and it even has specific dimensions of how that building was to be rebuilt and how it was to be paid. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. That's what Cyrus ordered. And let the gold and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took, be returned. You put them back into the house of God. And so, Darius said, therefore, Tatnai, governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Bozenai, and your associates, the governors who were in the province beyond the river, keep away from them. Stop interfering with them. And moreover, let the work on this house of God alone. Leave it alone. Let the governor of the Jews rebuild this house on its site. And, moreover, I make a decree regarding what you shall do for these elders of the Jews. The cost is to be paid to these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue, the tribute of the province from beyond the river. The taxes that you're collecting for me, I am telling you, I allocate that to this project. Okay, whatever is needed, bulls, rams, or sheep for burnt offerings, wheat, salt, wine, or oil, let that be given to them day by day without fail, that they may offer pleasing sacrifices. And I make a decree that if anyone alters this edict, a beam shall be pulled out of his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a dunghill. This is the law of the Medes and the Persians, by the way, which cannot be changed. We know that from other. And may the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who shall put out a hand to alter this or to destroy this house. I, Darius, make a decree, let it be done with all diligence. There's no mistaking the intention of Darius. So Tatnai, his governor, had no choice. And so, as chapter 6 continues, the temple is finished. It's finished on the third day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. So it's taken a long time from the first year of Cyrus, all the way through Cyrus's reign, all the way through Artaxerxes' reign, and into the 6th year of Darius before this temple to be rebuilt. But at last it was rebuilt. And on verse 19 of chapter 6, on the 14th day of the first month, that next year, the returned exiles kept the Passover. First time in a long time. And they celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a 7-day feast. Now, chapter 7. Finally, Ezra himself enters into the story. Now, after this, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, so that actually goes backwards a few years, Ezra, the son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Marioth, son of Zeriah, son of Uzi, son of Buki, son of Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. So he's establishing his bona fides. He is a priest in the priestly line of Aaron. You can trace his genealogy back all the way. He is commissioned. We read in verse 5, he went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe, skilled in the law of Moses that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. And the king granted him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was upon him. So not only was he a priest, but he was a scholar. He was a very educated man. You kind of equate the word scribe with the word lawyer. He was educated and a master of Jewish law. And he went up also to Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes, and along with some of the people, priests and Levites. And Ezra came to Jerusalem in the 5th month in the 7th year of the king, For on the first day of the first month he began to go up from Babylonia, and on the first day of the 5th month he came to Jerusalem. It took 4 months for him to make that journey, but it only took him 4 months, for the good hand of his God was on him. And this is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra, and he brought it with him. I make a decree, verse 13, any one of the people of Israel or their priests or Levites in my kingdom who freely offers to go to Jerusalem may go with you, Ezra. For you are sent by the king and his 7 counselors to make inquiries about Judah and Jerusalem. I think this is the investigation that we spoke of when they sent letters after Cyrus died. They sent a letter. Artaxerxes ordered an investigation. He sent Ezra. So he sends him with money. With this money you shall with all diligence buy bulls, rams, and lambs. Whatever seems good to you and your brothers, do with the rest. The vessels that have been given you for the service of the house of your God, you shall deliver before the Lord. Whatever else is required for the house of your God, which it falls to you to provide, you may provide it out of the king's treasury. I'm going to make a comment about this in a minute. I, Artaxerxes the king, make a decree to all the treasurers in the province beyond the river. Whatever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, requires of you, let it be done with all diligence, up to, so not quite a blank check. He sets some upper limits on his generosity. Whatever is decreed by the God of heaven, let it be done in full. We also notify you, verse 24, it shall not be lawful to impose tribute, custom, or toll on any one of the priests, the Levites, the singers, the doorkeepers, the temple servants, or other servants of this house of God. That is the foundation of tax-free status, which in America churches still enjoy. You, Ezra, according to the wisdom of your God that is in your hand, appoint magistrates and judges, and those who do not know the law of your God you shall teach. Okay, what we have seen here, Artaxerxes, the king of the Medo-Persian Empire, has now established government subsidy of the Jewish religion, tax-free status for all of the members of the religious community of the Jewish religion, and religious education funded by the state. Wow. It's all right there. Astonishing.
So in the beauty of that, there's also
Yeah.
a catch. They have no excuse.
Yeah.
It removes the excuse. They have no barriers. The barriers have all been removed for them to flourish for God.
And it kind of seems like they did. Except, all right, the prophets end with Malachi, around 400 BC. And so we talk about the 400 silent years between the end of Malachi and the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. And during those 400 years, you've got the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, and the Hasmonean dynasty arises in Judah out of the remnants of the Greek Empire, and you have the Maccabees, and you have the establishment of Hanukkah, and then you have the rise of the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Zealots and the Essenes. Those groups, those separate groups that are now present when we start to read the New Testament. So the Jewish religion has survived and flourished and thrived, but success is not always healthy,
Hmm.
right? Success is not always healthy. Because the days of freedom, and I think it's true in our experience here in America, the days of the freedom of Christianity to grow without being hindered by Tobiah and Sanballat and the opposition of rebuilding Judah. Christianity in the United States was free to grow and thrive and flourish, and it did. But it also decayed from inside, right?
Mhm.
And what we have left by the 20th century, what we have left is a lot of outward religion with a lot of inner nothing, just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So you have, it's kind of like, it's what was true of those two groups then is true of the two opposing factions in Christianity today. You've got the far right and the far left. The Pharisees representing the far right and the Sadducees representing the far left. They were not the Sadducees, we know, they were not spiritual. They were practical. They didn't believe in heaven, they didn't believe in the resurrection, they didn't believe in angels. They were just interested in the political influence, right? They were the wealthy. And the Pharisees, they were like, what is that?
Wooded sepulchres.
Yeah, what is that Baptist church that protests at military funerals and things like that? Like Wellsboro something out in the Midwest. So this group that is radically right? Far right. Like the very worst of the Pharisees. So, and what there's a representation, there's the appearance of sanctity, but these megachurch pastors who have their own private jets to fly up, and the abuse of so freedom to grow without opposition doesn't always mean that the growth is healthy.
You don't protect, you're not on the defense, you're just on the offense. Take. And there's a price. And it's sad when we're Bible believers. We've read all that God has given to us. And we know that, and you had just, before we got here, talked about the 7 letters to the 7 churches. And it's of my understanding that those are 7 literal churches, but there are also 7 types of churches that can be present at any one given time. And we know which one everybody wants to be, but because there's only a couple that are somewhat spoken well of.
Yeah.
But one of the things you catch on to real quick is the ones that have financial everything.
Yeah.
They got so much money in the bank.
Right.
They could make so much of a difference, but yet it's like they're trying to bring heaven down to earth instead of the embodiment of human beings to heaven. They're trying to create their own Jerusalem here by their big buildings and their gold inlays and their fancy windows and their aircraft and their private runways. And then, like you said, it's far be it for a man to judge another man's salvation. A man can be saved, we know that, and fall so far away that he looks as lost as any other lost man. but he's saved.
Yeah.
But the damage that's been done and the difference, I mean, I don't know who Joel Osteen is, and I don't even care, I don't ever want to meet him, but I can tell you that from the very first time I ever saw his face, all I could see was horns coming out of his head.
He's a celebrity. That's the danger. There's a danger with celebrity. And not many Christian leaders can handle celebrity well. Billy Graham is one that comes to mind, who for the most part avoided controversy, he avoided.
And he struggled with his son Franklin, because Franklin was a pain in his butt for a lot of years, and a lot of people would come to him and, try to get at him because of Franklin. But then look what happened to Franklin. He turned it around.
So,
No, it's tough. I mean, you have to be careful what you wish for.
yeah.
Every church, oh, we wish we had a big treasury and we had this. But we all know the reality is Christianity is about relationships. It's just relationships.
When I never learned this lesson more profoundly than when I went to the Dominican Republic. And, we're coming down there to help them. We had nurses and doctors to do medical clinics. And I was on a construction team. And we brought our power tools and our fancy tool belts and work boots. And I was probably wearing, from my head to my toe, I was probably wearing a year's salary for any one of the people there, at least that. And what I learned in the Dominican Republic, I learned it firsthand from seeing it. Things that I have heard, but I saw firsthand, is that you don't need things to be joyful.
Actually, I think too many things.
Too many things.
I think it inhibits our ability to see miracles, because they still happen.
Yeah. One of the boys that was working with me, I had my nice fancy tool belt and I forget now, Wolverine work boots, and he's wearing flip-flops, and he's using a borrowed hammer with a wooden handle, and he didn't have a nail apron, and so he took a 2-liter bottle, empty 2-liter soda bottle, and cut part of the top of the bottle away, and cut a slit so he could feed his belt through it, and he strapped that 2-liter soda bottle to his belt, and he put nails in it, and that was his nail apron. I have a picture of it. And he, from the moment I saw him in the morning until the moment I said goodbye to him at night, his smile never left his face. And he had so much joy. I checked, and it turned out that his feet and my feet were the same size. So when I left the Dominican that year, I left the Wolverine boots for him, and I was happy to give them to him. It's not things.
It's always the people. It's always the relationships that are built. And especially when they're built in the Word of God.
We're hoping to take a trip back there, maybe as soon as next February, because they have a Christian school and a church, and we're talking with them right now. I had a conversation with them last Friday, a video conference with them. Pastor Thomas and Esther Deverlus. He's Haitian, she's Dominican. They've married. They started by homeschooling their own 3 children on the front porch of their house. Some neighbors saw what they were doing and asked if they would educate their children too, because they were Haitians that could not go to school in the Dominican because they have no standing,
Right.
so they can't take advantage of Dominican services. So Pastor Thomas and Esther started a school with their 3 children and their neighbor kids. That school now has over 400 students.
Wow, that's awesome.
2 sessions, morning and afternoon, because they can't get everybody in the building, so they have a morning session and an afternoon session.
That's great.
I've been there twice, working on construction projects. The last time was 2018, so I'm due to go back. So we're hoping that we can take a trip there. Maybe, our school is sending a missions team to Puerto Rico next week during winter break. We have 4 students and 2 adults going. Next year, I'm hoping that that trip will be to the Dominican Republic. We're hoping that our church and school will partner with this church and school, and we'll figure out a way to have some kind of exchange program. Maybe we'll have some of them come and spend some time with us, and we'll spend some time with them.
They'll be the same week when we get the school off.
Well, that's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we're shooting for.
Nice.
And Kevin Berry, the school principal, his wife is a nurse. She would be interested in accompanying us. My son Matt might be interested in going, maybe Lindsay,
If she's got the time off,
if
right?
she's available. And we could run some medical clinics while we're there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
we're kind of excited. We have some people from, is from the Dominican Republic. We were talking to her. She'd like to go on this trip with us. The Spanish teacher here, she's from the Dominican. She would like to go on this trip with us. So we may take as many as 30 or 32 people.
Mhm.
They can accommodate groups as big as that. So I'm very excited about that possibility.
Mhm.
We'll see if it happens. All right.
Yeah, put it on the prayer list.
Yep. Thank you, Lord, for our time tonight to talk about Ezra and what we learned from that, what we can apply in our own lives and our own situation. Thank you, Father, for this story of your provision through King Cyrus and King Artaxerxes and King Darius, for the way that you have provided. And it reminds us, Father, that we don't ever have to worry about, can we afford to do what you want us to do? If you want us to do it, we don't need to ask if we can afford it. And I'm grateful for that reminder, that encouragement. I pray that you would help us as we go to our homes tonight, give us a restful night tonight, and for the rest of this week ahead. We ask that we would find ways to give you glory in our lives each day as we receive it as a gift from you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Yeah, another lesson that I saw in Israel that I had learned in the church in Vermont. When we were building that church from the ground up, the business made the offer to the church to provide all the paperwork, all the paper products, and plastic silverware and napkins for the duration of the construction. Because, people came and went. Only a few of us were able to be there for the whole project. And they were just getting to know me then, although they were letting me preach on Sundays. And the only way that came about more likely was that Pastor Bruce, instead of preaching 3 services a week, he could take it on 2 because he was the general contractor.
Yeah.
And he was working his butt off.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a position in the church. There was no position. I just preached. And but they turned that offer down.
Yeah.
And I didn't agree with it
Okay.
because their biblical premise was because it's a non-Christian organization, they couldn't receive a gift. And I was so against it. I said there's so many instances in the Bible where God uses lost people to help his people.
That's interesting.
And I thought that the community was reaching out to us that one aspect, we closed that door,
Mhm.
because we were self-righteous.
Did it-
We're too good to have something from
Yeah.
here.
Did-
And meanwhile, don't even bother coming to our
Right.
church, because we're too good.
But
I
at the
just,
same
I
time,
didn't like
they
that.
allowed the Monets to help, and they became members of.
Yeah, it was weird.
It's kind of a thing. I've been in a lot of churches, our style of church that says we don't want to do things like spaghetti suppers or pancake breakfast to raise money. The work of God's church ought to be supported by God's people. Sure, but look.
Little bit of
Now, I do believe this. I believe anytime you have a school attached to
No.
a church, a physical church,
Yeah,
that the physical church should not be surviving financially because of the finances of the school.
yeah,
That, to me,
Yeah.
has to be separate and distinct.
yeah.
In my eyes, I'm not saying I'm
Yeah.
right.
Well, I
I'm not
agree with
saying
you.
I'm right.
The church, this church doesn't take anything out of the school. If anything, we're hoping that the ministry that we provide the community might help reach families. We have a lot of, it used to be that when families became part of the school community, at least one of them has to be an active member of a church,